today we're going deep into, one of the oldest stories around.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Cain and Abel. Straight from the book of Genesis.
Okay.
I know you might think, oh, Sunday school, we've heard that one. But I promise you there's layers here. And we're going to uncover some stuff that's going to make you rethink, this whole story.
I mean, it is amazing how these stories, they keep coming back.
They do.
Don't they?
Yeah.
These ancient stories, so relevant today. We're talking about jealousy, violence, guilt, even like the whole birth of civilization itself. All packed into just a few verses. It's crazy.
I know. It's a lot to unpack, for sure.
Yeah.
So we're going to start, I guess, with a little bit of setting the scene, right?
Yeah.
So we've got Adam and Eve. They're fresh out of the Garden of Eden.
Right.
And now they have the first human kids, Cain and Abel. So far, so good. You think, okay, humanity's on a roll.
Yeah, things are going well. Well, not so fast. It gets interesting right away. I mean, like, we see this division of labor. We see Abel becoming a shepherd, so he's tending flocks.
Okay.
And Cain, he's working the land. He's the farmer.
Right.
It's almost like a tiny version of how societies would develop. You've got these different roles, different ways of life, kind of all coming together.
Yeah. And then, of course, you get to the offering scene.
Yes.
And Abel, he offers, the best of his livestock, a blood sacrifice, while Cain brings the fruits of his labor, right? The harvest.
The harvest, yeah.
And this is where things get really interesting because God seems to favor Abel's offering.
Right.
But the text never really says why.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah. Is it the type of offering? Or the quality? Or is there something else going on?
It's been debated for centuries. Some scholars, they'll say, well, back then, blood sacrifices, those were seen as more valuable. They symbolize like a deeper devotion,
Yeah.
But then others are like, no, it was about the quality. Maybe Abel brought his best, and Cain, well, maybe he kind of, just went through the motions.
Right.
And then there's another group that thinks, well, maybe it wasn't about the offering at all. Maybe it was about Abel. Like maybe there was something about him, his character, or his relationship with God that just made the offering more pleasing,
It's interesting.
It really is. That ambiguity is so fascinating because it forces us to think about, the mystery of why does God choose one thing over another? What does it really mean to please God? Is it what you do? Is it what you're thinking? Or is it some combination? We don't know.
Yeah. Really makes you think, huh?
It does.
But one thing we do know is that Cain is not happy.
No, not at all.
He's angry. He's jealous. The text describes him as downcast.
Totally.
Yeah.
And God sees that, right? He doesn't just ignore it. He talks to Cain. He warns him about sin. And the way he describes it is fascinating. Sin is crouching at the door, waiting to pounce,
It's powerful imagery.
It really is. But then he also emphasizes free will. You have the power to choose. You can rule over this.
Yeah.
It's almost like God is saying, look, I see you're struggling. I get it. But you have a choice. You can let this anger control you, or you can, choose a different path. It's all about responsibility. And honestly, doesn't that feel relevant today? I mean, think about it. We're constantly bombarded with choices, temptations, information, everything.
Yeah.
It's like we've got all these digital sins just waiting to grab us. So how do we navigate that?
I know. It really is like a constant battle.
Right.
But Cain, unfortunately, he makes the wrong choice. He lets that anger win. He invites Abel out to the field. And, well, you know what happens next. It's the first murder.
And the way it's described, it's so simple.
Right.
But so chilling. Just a few words. And that image of the field, I mean, it's not in the garden anymore, right? It's out in the wilderness.
Yeah.
It's like life is just harsher out there. So it's like the story is telling us, okay, paradise is lost. And now violence. That's just part of being human.
It's like, yeah, we've lost paradise physically, but also inside of us,
Yeah.
But then God confronts Cain. He says, where's your brother? And of course, Cain gives that infamous line, am I my brother's keeper?
Oh, yeah.
That's a question that has echoed throughout history.
It has. I mean, it's a fundamental question about, how are we connected? Are we responsible for each other?
Right. Do we have an obligation to look out for each other?
Exactly.
Oh.
Even when it's hard, even when it's not convenient. Cain is trying to avoid responsibility.
Yeah.
But God's like, nope, you are your brother's keeper.
Yeah.
You can't just ignore other people's suffering and pretend it has nothing to do with you.
Yeah, it's a big question, isn't it?
Right.
But it really seems like Cain's punishment is all about that,
Yeah.
shirked responsibility.
Yeah, totally.
He's banished from the land, cursed. He can't farm anymore.
And that's got to sting, right? For a guy who worked the soil.
For sure. Talk about adding insult to injury.
Right. You almost see this poetic justice to it.
Yeah.
I mean, Cain spilled his brother's blood on the ground, and now he's cut off from it. The earth won't yield for him anymore. It's like nature itself is rejecting him.
Yeah. But then in the middle of all of this, God gives Cain this mark for protection so no one will kill him.
It's kind of crazy when you think about it.
I know. So what do you make of this mark? Because the text doesn't say what it was.
Exactly. It's anyone's guess.
Yeah.
Over the centuries, people have come up with all sorts of ideas.
Like what?
I mean, everything.
Yeah.
Like physical deformities, tattoos, some kind of supernatural sign, you know?
Yeah.
And the interpretations are all over the place. Some people, they see the mark as like a symbol of shame. You know, you're marked forever by your crime.
Right.
Others, though, they see it as God's mercy.
Okay, yeah.
He's preventing more bloodshed. So even in punishment, there's this element of protection, stopping that cycle of violence from going any further. What do you think?
What strikes me is how much we don't know.
Yeah.
It sparked all this imagination, all these debates.
Right.
And it makes you realize these stories aren't just some history lesson.
No, not at all.
They're like these windows into, I don't know, like human nature, full of symbolism, open to all sorts of interpretations.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
That's what makes them timeless. They speak to something deeper, something that goes beyond any culture or time period.
Totally. So Cain, now he's got this mark. He's exiled. He travels east of Eden to a land called Nod. And this is where it takes another turn.
It does.
Cain builds a city.
Wait, back up a sec. So the first murderer becomes the first city builder.
I know, it's wild, right?
It's pretty ironic, isn't it?
It's like super ironic. It makes you think, like, what does it say about civilization itself?
Right. Was it founded on violence?
Yeah.
Can something good come from something so horrible?
Yeah.
I mean, it forces us to really grapple with the idea of progress.
I mean, yeah, so much of history is built on conflict, on taking over.
Exactly.
Can we ever really escape that?
Good question.
And then you've got the list of Cain's descendants. You learn that they become skilled in all these things, right? Jabal with livestock, Jubal with music, Tubal-Cain, he's working with metal. It's like, even in exile, carrying this guilt, they're still pushing things forward.
It's a pretty powerful message about resilience, don't you think? They're under a curse, but they're not letting it define them. They're creating, innovating. And it's like they're saying, we're still here.
Yeah.
And it begs a question. Are culture and technology tied to morality? Like, can someone who does awful things still help advance society?
Man, I'm really seeing how the story is not just a simple story.
No.
It's like a reflection of us, of our own struggles.
I think you hit the nail on the head.
With good and evil.
Yeah.
With our choices. With consequences.
It's a reminder that history is not always black and white. We want to label people heroes, villains, but it's so much more complicated than that.
Right.
Everyone has the potential for both.
Yeah.
Right. Even those who mess up big time, they can still leave a legacy that's kind of messy.
And then you get to Lamech, who's a descendant of Cain,
Oh, yeah.
and he boasts about killing someone. And he claims he deserves even more vengeance than Cain. It's like this chilling echo.
It is. Like, is the story telling us that violence just leads to more violence?
Yeah.
That we're doomed to repeat history?
Yeah, are we stuck?
It definitely feels like a warning.
For sure.
Lamech's whole deal, it's like a messed up version of justice.
Yeah.
He's hiding behind Cain's protection while doing the same kind of thing. It's a cautionary tale. You can't use past wrongs to justify new ones. It doesn't work.
And then finally, amidst all this darkness, there's a little bit of hope.
Yeah.
Adam and Eve have another son.
Right. Seth.
Seth, he's like this replacement for Abel.
Yeah. New start.
Exactly, a new beginning. And the last line of the passage, it says, "At that time, people began to call on the name of the Lord." It feels like a turning point.
It does.
After all that tragedy, there's this return to faith. It's like everyone's trying to find their way again, searching for some meaning in a world that's now filled with, sin and violence.
Yeah.
Man, we've been through a lot in this deep dive.
Yeah, we have.
From like curiosity and wonder to like shock, even a little sadness, right?
It's true.
And now maybe there's some hope at the end.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like this story, it takes you on such a ride.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. But before we get too emotional, I want to go back to something you said earlier
Okay.
about Cain building a city. I keep thinking about that.
Yeah.
What would it have been like to actually live in that city?
Oh, wow.
Knowing that the guy who built it, he was a murderer.
Right.
Would people be like, nervous? Like, would there be this shadow hanging over everything?
It's a really interesting question. Like, you wonder, what was the impact of Cain's sin? Not just on him, but on everyone after him. Did they see the city as like a way to make things better? Trying to build something good out of something so awful?
Yeah.
Or was there always this like fear in the back of their minds
Yeah.
that the violence could come back?
And thinking about those early cities, I bet they had some of the same problems we have today.
Oh, for sure.
Overcrowding, social unrest, maybe even like messing up the environment.
Yeah, probably.
Like some things never change no matter how much technology we have.
Right. We think we're so advanced, but underneath it all, we're still figuring out how to live together, how to build a fair society, how to, not destroy the planet.
It's true. So where does this leave us? What have we learned from Cain and Abel?
Well, I think it's a reminder that we're all part of this big story, this human story,
Yeah.
and it goes way, way back.
He does.
And we carry the good and the bad from those who came before us. And we have a responsibility to, keep the story going for the next generation.
Yeah, and it's not just about the big historical stuff. It's
Yeah.
about our everyday choices.
Exactly.
How we treat each other, how we deal with anger and jealousy, how we choose to, build our own little worlds.
Yeah, the Cain and Abel story, it's like a mini version of that.
It is.
It reminds us that what we do matters,
Yeah.
that we're all connected, and that even small acts of kindness or meanness, they can change things.
I like that. So maybe the real question isn't, am I my brother's keeper?
Right.
It's more like, what kind of keeper am I going to be?
That's a great way to put it. And I think it gives everyone listening something to think about.
I hope so.
We've seen the dark side, the light side, the violence, the hope, all in this one story. And now it's up to us to decide, how do we take this story forward? How do we write our own chapter?
That's a great way to end it. Thanks for coming along on this journey with us.
We encourage you to keep exploring this text. Read it, think about it, talk about it. Until next time, happy exploring.